Welcome back to the second episode in our Penderyn lineup. We've got Myth this time. What do we know about Myth?
Well, unlike most Penderyns, there is no novel cask finish involved here. But this is where things get a bit quizzical, a bit curious, because the current Penderyn website and literature maintains that Myth is matured in a mixture of red wine and bourbon barrels. However, the overwhelming majority of sources I checked, including the notes from the store where I bought this one, insists it's 100% bourbon. So there's a bit of an enigma there, with some saying it's all bourbon, some saying bourbon and red wine. So my speculation is that at some point they have changed from it being a purely bourbon release and are now selling a Myth, which is both bourbon and red wine matured. I'm not certain though, so I'm going to approach this one with as open a mind as possible because I really just don't know. So yeah, that's my assumption. The latest releases of Myth have red wine as well, probably to add complexity or character, which may have been lacking from the purely bourbon matured one, but I just don't know. If anyone does know and wants to educate us in the comments, then it would be fantastic.
Well, certainly. We will just, in the meantime, have to drop the whiskey science and see if we can find out.
This one is noticeably darker colour than the other two in the Dragon series that I have here, the Legend, which we tried previously, and the Celt, which is coming up. Again, not chill filtered and bottled at 41%.
A very curious strength there. I'm not sure if that really means anything. I think probably what it means is they tried 40 and it clouded up, and 41 was just what it needed.
That's their sweet spot for.
That's often why you get an odd percentage every now and then. Now this one is really quite different. Hopefully you've seen our previous video on the first one, the Legend. This one is immediately more going on the nose. This smells like, for one, a much older whiskey, and a whiskey with much more cask influence.
Still some heavy smouldering heat there, some spirit heat.
It's pretty lively, that's for sure. In fact, there was far more on this one of a prickle on the nose. It's far less of a gentle whiskey all over. But there is savoury characters in this one immediately, which were totally absent from the last one.
Not being finished in a Madeira cask, I think this will be much darker and possibly heavier than most of Penderyn's range.
I think whatever casks they've used, and assuming this is uncoloured, which I think it probably confidently can say it probably is uncoloured because the nuance between the different bottles is so slight, but there that I think trying to artificially colour these would have been a bit pointless, really. This one has a much darker colour, and that's really reflected in the aroma, certainly. It's hugely more involved and much more cask influenced than the previous one, which was sort of all just a design of spirit alone, almost.
There's some fairly lush malty grains. Think of the smell of when you're brewing beer at home.
Very grainy, a little bit of quite a bit sort of a bready character, a savoury bread loaf character. It's much more lifted in a totally different spectrum from that last one. I'm liking it more already just by the nose. Let's see what's on the palate at full strength.
Oh, that is, yes, in comparison to the Legend, that is very savoury.
Heaps more wood on this one. There is everything you'd expect from active bourbon wood on this one. There's vanilla, coconut, salt caramel. There's all kinds of things on here. There's a little bit of fruitiness as well. It's almost a little bit of Speyside fruitiness. But and hang on, I may be having a question answered. This has, as the last one did, quite a distinct fiery catch on it on the way down. The chilies are still here. So that's another indication towards that maybe being a distillery character, and that is quite fascinating. That's really, now that I've had 2 sips of this one, that's really quite remarkable.
So a preponderance of fairly young spirit, but nonetheless is carrying quite a bit of flavour with it.
I'd say was I taking yet another complete shot in the dark, so don't put me on the back of any boxes here, but this one tastes far more like something approaching 12 years old, maybe even a little bit of older whiskey to top it off. Any wine finishes that may or may not be there, or rather wine casks, this one hasn't been finished, but it may have been blended with some red wine casks. That's a bit more difficult to say. If they're there, I think they're probably there in fairly scant concentration. I'm not getting anything really, really dominant that would scream out about a red wine finish.
Could be contributing to some of those dry, fruity characters.
Doesn't mean it's not there, but it's too faint for me to really go all in and claim I can taste them. But the bourbon, quite on its own, is remarkably active on this one. I'd say we're dealing with first fills here, which was maybe not the case in the previous one. Those might have been second, even maybe third.
If this isn't artificially coloured, then it's fairly dark for something that's been relatively young whiskey out of a bourbon cask.
Really good.
I'm used to those being far more
stuff.
pale in their natural colour.
I'll just give that a wee smidge there.
Yeah, adding water first initially releases kind of a big plume of a strong spirity vapour, which takes a while to dissipate, and then the underlying aromas coming through after watering. That
has revealed what may be just the slightest. That gives me an inkling of a red wine cask now. That's got some of the slightly darker, slightly more sort of to the periphery flavours that don't quite match up with bourbon casks to me. Still not really enough for me to make an absolute call on it. But
then again, if anyone watching does know if or when they switched to Penderyn and Myth from using just all bourbon to bourbon cask and red wine maturation, when it happened or if it happened, or then I would be very, very pleased to know, because it's a bit of a mystery having the enigmatic combination of data out there on the internet.
Adding that water though made it a bit more gentle, but I think it's taken some of the liveliness away. So I think that one I'd recommend without water.
It's extinguished a lot of that chili heat, which was a bit of an engaging, unique character previously.
But no, this one far more takes my fancy. Like to go and use dangerous rhetoric, this tastes more like a real whiskey to me. This one is more sort of integrated. It's more developed. It's got more of a personality to it that's a bit more not distinct, because the last one was perfectly distinct in what it had. This one is just a bit more maybe refined, a bit more mature in its character.
To get a bit more abstract about what I'm tasting, my wife tried a number of Penderyns at a whisky tasting we attended some time ago, and she said she spent time in Wales, and she said it puts her quite in mind of that. Things like rainfall and rocks, quintessentially Welsh landscape, there's a bit of that flavour coming through, and I can kind of see that. This has reminded me of rainfall on tar seal, that unique aroma, and just sort of some lush but dark, heavy, wet vegetation and rocky hills and so forth. There's sort of a minerality to it.
Well, that is getting very, very esoteric. They have, alas, not given us any particular tasting
they have
notes
on the box
bottom
this
there.
came with, but I've left that aside.
We'd have to just mine that data elsewhere. But certainly there is such a thing as whiskey terroir to a certain extent. I think more to where it was matured than where it was necessarily distilled, but that's an entirely different conversation. I do wonder whether if you can buy this in Wales and they have the tasting notes.
Well, it's available from the UK.
In Welsh, I wonder. That would be a hell of a thing. You'd need to have a little scroll and it would turn into the Bay of Tapestry if it was in Welsh.
Right, I think, or at least the box for the original Penderyn I bought did have English one side and Welsh on the other.
Oh, good grief. That would be an undertaking. So, that was the second one in the lineup, Myth, and there's one more to go with Celt, which promises to be a little bit different.
As for scores, do you rate it higher? Lower?
Oh, scores, yes, almost. You could see that one spinning away, couldn't you? I would rate this significantly higher. This is, to me, a much more complete whiskey. I'm much more on board with it. This one is a 79 from me.
In the end, I'm enjoying this exactly as much as the previous offering. It's different, which is good. They're both distinct from each other in a way which is engaging and invites you to take a second sip. In terms of its strengths and weaknesses, it's about on par. It rates another 75 from me. It does lots of things right. It still has that peppery heat and a combination of some fairly quirky flavours. But again, the same kind of weaknesses, that it's kind of timid. It's not as expressive as it could or should be. It should both be either a livelier young spirit flavour or some more intense flavours from the wood. Just something that's holding back. I wouldn't say it's lacking, just that it's there, but it's not there as intensely as it could be.
All right, well, we'll have to have a crack at the final offering and see if that one gets Dave to budge. Catch us then for that one. Slandra.